Today, we're going to talk about a man who started his life on the absolute fringes of society, but rose to become a world-class scholar, a fearless reformer, and the main architect of the Indian Constitution. This is the unbelievable story of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar.
And really, that's the whole question, isn't it? His entire life is basically the answer. It's this incredible story of how someone can take their own personal pain and forge it into a tool to free millions. It's a story of pure resilience against a system that was literally designed to keep him down.
So Bhimrao Ambedkar was born into the Mahar caste. In the rigid Hindu caste system of the time, that meant he was considered an untouchable. From his earliest memories, he was hit with this deep-seated prejudice. It was a world that from day one told him he was worth less, simply because of who his family was.
I mean, think about this. For a young Bhimrao, school wasn't just about learning to read and write. It was a daily masterclass in humiliation. He had to sit by himself in a corner on a little mat he had to bring from home. When he was thirsty, he couldn't just get a drink. Someone had to pour water into his hands from way up high so he wouldn't contaminate the cup. A teacher once asked him to come up to the blackboard, and the other kids literally scrambled to grab their lunchboxes, terrified that his shadow might pollute their food. And as a kid, you just can't make sense of that. What could possibly be so wrong with him?
Well, that confusion was about to turn into a really painful understanding during one trip. He and his brother, dressed up in their best clothes, got on a train to go visit their father in another town. You know, just two excited kids heading out on an adventure.
When they got to the station, their dad wasn't there yet. The station master saw these two well-dressed boys and was actually super kind and helpful at first. But then, he asked what castes they were from, and Bhimrao just told him the truth. They were Mahar. And just like that, everything changed. The station master was, in his own words, stunned, and that kind look on his face just vanished.
And that's when the sheer absurdity of it all became crystal clear. Not a single bullock cart driver would take them, because they were afraid of being polluted. Finally, one guy agreed, but only if they paid double and drove the cart themselves. The driver just walked alongside it. For young Bhimrao, the message couldn't have been clearer. His very presence, his touch, was seen as contamination. It was a moment that would stick with him forever.
But you know, even in all this darkness, there were little flickers of light. A high-caste teacher, a man named Krishnaji Keshav Ambedkar, saw his incredible potential. He didn't just encourage him, he actually gave Bhimrao his own last name. After a family dispute, a young Bhimrao made a promise to himself. He was going to pour every ounce of his being into his education. His entire family lived in one crowded room, so he would get some sleep after school and then wake up at 2 a.m. to study when the house was finally quiet.
And wow, did that promise pay off? His dedication fueled one of the most incredible academic careers you could imagine. Thanks to a scholarship from the Maharaja of Baroda, he got his BA, and then was sent all the way to Columbia University in New York. Get this, in just 3 years he earned a master's and a PhD. Then he was off to the London School of Economics. He wasn't just collecting degrees, though. He was building an intellectual arsenal, writing theses that systematically took apart the very system that oppressed him, all while struggling to make ends meet in a foreign country.
But there was a catch to this incredible opportunity. In exchange for the scholarship money, he had to sign an agreement. He had to come back and serve the state of Baroda for 10 years. So his world-class education was about to come face-to-face with the very system he was trying to escape.
So, just picture the scene. Dr. Ambedkar comes back to India armed with a doctorate from one of the best universities on the planet. He's been living in the US and the UK for years, where he was treated like a scholar, not an untouchable. You'd think he'd be welcomed back as a hero, right? Ready for a top-tier job in the Baroda civil service.
The reality, though, was just a brutal shock. Despite his PhD, no one would rent him a room. In his fancy new office, his own staff would literally throw files and papers onto his desk to avoid touching him. They wouldn't even give him a glass of water. His world-class education meant absolutely nothing against centuries of prejudice.
He did finally find a place to stay, a Parsi guest house, but he had to hide his caste to get the room. That didn't last long. One morning, on his way to work, he was met by a mob of angry men with sticks. They'd found out who he was. They screamed at him, accusing him of polluting the building, and told him he had until evening to get out, or else.
And that was it. That was the real turning point. After just 12 days, forced out of his job, forced out of his home, he realized something profound. It didn't matter how smart he was or what degrees he had.
As long as the caste system existed, he would never, ever be treated as an equal. Trying to succeed as an individual wasn't the answer. The whole system had to be torn down.
And so, the scholar became the revolutionary. And what was his first weapon? The written word. He started a newspaper called Mooknayak, which means leader of the voiceless. He knew that to fight back, his community needed a voice. They needed a platform to tell their stories and to organize.
He also knew, from his own life, that the real path to freedom was through the very same tool he'd used, education. In 1924, he founded an association dedicated to uplifting the oppressed classes by creating hostels, schools, and libraries. He was literally building the infrastructure for a revolution of the mind.
And here's what's so crucial. His time at Columbia and LSE gave him more than just fancy degrees. It gave him the intellectual firepower to dismantle the arguments for caste. He could use economics, law, and logic to expose just how unjust it all was. Now he could stand in front of anyone, the British, the most powerful politicians in India, and argue, convincingly, for the rights of millions.
And this entire journey led him to his most important role. When India finally achieved independence, this man, the one who was denied water, the one who had papers thrown at him, he was the one they trusted with drafting the entire nation's founding document. He became the chairman of the Constitution Drafting Committee.
And into that Constitution, he poured every single lesson from his life. He built it on principles that were a direct response to everything he'd suffered. Justice for everyone, not just a select few. The liberty to think and believe what you want. Equality of status and opportunity. Legally destroying the caste hierarchy. And fraternity, which is all about making sure every single person has dignity.
But his fight wasn't just about his own community. Because he knew what oppression felt like, he became a fierce advocate for anyone who was marginalized. He was a huge champion for women's rights, arguing for their economic and social freedom. His vision was for a truly fair society, for everybody.
So you go from a little boy sitting on a mat in the corner of a classroom to the man who wrote equality into the law for a nation of millions. The life of Dr. Ambedkar really leaves you with one big question. What does it take to turn a lifetime of personal pain, not into bitterness, but into a blueprint for a better world for all of us?